When you live long enough, you start to realize that people don't always love you the way you love them. Sometimes, they only love what you own. My name is Margaret Ellis, and I've lived in the same little white house on Willow Street for over 40 years. My late husband, George, built it with his own hands. Every creak of the floorboard, every patch of sunlight through the old kitchen window, it holds a memory of him. To anyone else, it's just wood and paint, but to me, it's him. After George passed away, I tried to keep the house full of warmth. I baked cookies for the neighborhood kids, grew roses in the front yard, and watched the seasons change from my porch swing. It was my way of saying, I'm still here, George. I'm keeping our promise. But peace, you see, never lasts long when greed smells an opportunity. My son, Eric, was my pride and joy. He grew up kind, sensitive, but after marrying Samantha, something changed. She wasn't cruel outright, no. She was polite, sweet, and always had that perfect smile plastered on her face, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. At first, I tried to love her. I even gave them the master bedroom upstairs when they moved in temporarily to save for their own house. I told myself it was just a phase, that families help each other. But one afternoon, as I passed by the kitchen, I overheard Samantha talking on the phone. Yeah, the property's in a great neighborhood. Old lady's house, but we can renovate it fast. Once it's listed, we'll make a killing. I froze. Old lady's house? Listed? Was she talking about my house? I waited until she hung up and walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. My hands were trembling, but I smiled. Oh, Samantha dear, were you talking to someone about work? She didn't even blink. Yes, Mom, just my friend. She's a real estate agent. I'm helping her out. Her voice was too casual, too rehearsed. That night, I sat in my room, the old clock ticking on the wall. I couldn't sleep. Something inside me, that quiet instinct mothers have, whispered, "She's lying." Days passed. They both acted normal, but I could feel it. Whispers stopped when I entered the room. Eric avoided my eyes. Samantha kept asking strange questions about property taxes and ownership papers. Then one morning, while cleaning the living room, I found a folder on the coffee table. It had my address written on it. Curiosity, or maybe fear, made me open it. Inside were real estate photos of my home, taken without me knowing, and a printed draft of a property listing. The headline read, "Charming vintage home in a prime neighborhood, available for quick sale." I stared at it for what felt like hours. My throat burned. My chest tightened. They were trying to sell my house. I wanted to scream, to cry, to tear the papers apart. But I didn't. I just sat down in George's old armchair and took a deep breath. George always used to say, "Maggie, never let anger speak before wisdom does." So I waited. That evening, when Eric came home, I asked him to sit down. "Eric," I said softly, "did you or Samantha list this house for sale?" He looked startled. "What?" "No, Mom, of course not." I handed him the papers. His face went pale. He didn't even try to deny it for long. "Mom, listen," he started. "It's just, the market's really good right now. We thought maybe if we sell this one, we could move you into a smaller place. Something easier to maintain. I asked quietly. He looked down. "Samantha found a buyer already. It's a good deal. A buyer. They already had a buyer." For a moment I couldn't breathe. My own son had agreed to sell the home his father built, the one where he took his first steps, without even asking me. "Eric," I whispered, "this house isn't just a property. It's my life." He rubbed his temples, frustrated. "Mom, please don't be dramatic. You'll thank us later." That night, after they went to bed, I walked through every room of the house, touching the walls, the furniture, the faded photographs. I could still hear George's laughter echoing faintly in the living room. And that's when I made a decision. If they thought they could take my home away from me, they had another thing coming. The next morning, while they were at work, I went to town, first stop, the local real estate office. I spoke to an old friend, Helen, who still managed properties in the area. "Helen," I said, "I want to sell a house." She smiled politely. Of course, Margaret. Which one? I leaned closer. Samantha's. Helen blinked. Your daughter-in-law's house? I nodded, calm and steady. Yes. And I have all the paperwork she asked me to sign for mine. She just made the mistake of putting her contact info on them. By evening, I had everything I needed. I didn't want to ruin their lives, just teach them a lesson they'd never forget. A few days later, Samantha came home with that triumphant grin plastered on her face. Mom, we have a buyer. The offer's been accepted. Oh, really? I asked, stirring my tea. Yes, she said. And once it's sold, we'll get you a new place near the retirement community. I smiled sweetly. That's wonderful, dear. But I have some news too. She tilted her head, confused. Oh, what news? I decided to sell a house too, I said, setting my cup down. Yours. Her face went blank. What? Oh, don't worry, I said lightly. I used the same agent you mentioned. She's very efficient. She went pale. You can't do that. Oh, I think I can, I said, standing up slowly. You see, you taught me something valuable, Samantha. You showed me how to play dirty. And for the first time in years, I felt powerful again. Not angry, not broken, just in control. Of course, I didn't actually sell her house, but the listing went up, public, live, and with her contact number. Within hours, she was flooded with calls and emails from people asking to view her property. Eric came storming into my room, red-faced. Mom, what did you do? I looked up from my knitting and said calmly, Oh, nothing you didn't try first. He had no words. None at all, and as Samantha's perfect smile cracked into panic, I realized something. Justice doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs an old woman who refuses to be underestimated. But little did I know. My small act of revenge was about to spiral into something much, much bigger. The chaos began the very next morning. I woke to the sound of Samantha's voice echoing through the house, shrill and panicked. Eric, they've listed our house online. Do you know how many people called me last night? Some woman said she's already arranged a viewing. I sat up in bed, smoothed my blanket, and smiled quietly. The sun streamed through the lace curtains, painting little golden shapes across the quilt. Peaceful, serene. The way morning should be. Downstairs, the shouting grew louder. I could hear Eric trying to calm her down. Sam, stop yelling. I'll fix it, okay? Maybe it's just a mistake. But Samantha wasn't the kind of woman who accepted mistakes easily. Not unless they were someone else's fault. A few minutes later, she stormed into my room, her eyes blazing. Did you do this, Margaret? I looked up from my teacup, calm as ever. Do what, dear? She slammed her phone down on my dresser, screen facing me. There it was, her house listing, live on the real estate site. Her address, her photos, her contact info. This, she shouted. This is illegal. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the silence stretch. Is it? Because I could have sworn you said the same thing about my house last week. Her face turned crimson. That's different. We were trying to help you, to help me, I interrupted, my voice gentle but firm. By selling the only thing your husband's father left us? Without telling me? She took a step back, eyes darting. You shouldn't have seen those papers. It wasn't final. Not yet, I said softly, but it would have been. For a long moment we just stood there. Two women separated by decades, one weathered by life's storms, the other thinking she could control them. Finally, Samantha hissed, You'll regret this. Oh dear, I smiled faintly. I already did. That's why I stopped being the quiet old lady you thought I was. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard it rattled the picture frames. I could almost hear George chuckling somewhere in the house. He'd always said, Never start a fire unless you're ready to watch it burn. By noon, the phone calls started flooding in. Agents, buyers, curious neighbors. Some even showed up at her front yard, asking for open house timings. Samantha's perfect suburban peace crumbled like wet paper. I watched from my porch swing as she marched outside, screaming into her phone, threatening lawsuits. Eric was trying to calm her, but his voice cracked under the pressure. For the first time, I saw something new in him. Guilt. That evening, he came to me, quieter than I'd seen him in years. Mom, he began. Why are you doing this? You're my mother. I just wanted to make things easier for you. I set my knitting down and looked at him. Easier, Eric? Or easier for you? He sighed. You live alone. This house is too big. You thought wrong. I cut in gently. This house isn't a burden. It's the last piece of your father I have left. He rubbed the back of his neck. Samantha pushed the idea. She said it would be good financially. I went along with it. Did you ever stop to ask me how I felt? His silence was answer enough. Eric, I said, my voice trembling just a little. You can buy new houses, new furniture, even new families if you want. But a home. Once you destroy that, you can never build it again. He looked down, eyes glistening. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to hurt you. I smiled faintly. I know. But sometimes when you let others speak for you, their greed becomes your sin. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. Samantha stopped talking to me completely. She avoided eye contact, and I could sense her plotting something. I wasn't wrong. One afternoon, I got a visit from a young man in a suit. He introduced himself as Mr. Hanley, a real estate lawyer. Mrs. Ellis, he said politely, I'm here regarding a complaint filed against you by your daughter-in-law. It seems you fraudulently listed her property for sale. I took a deep breath, kept my smile, and invited him in. Please have a seat. Tea? He looked surprised. Sure. As I poured the tea, I pulled out a neat little folder from the drawer. Copies of the original documents Samantha had me sign for my house. Before you proceed, I said, sliding the folder toward him. Perhaps you should look at these. He opened it, flipping through the pages. His brow furrowed. These look like real estate authorization forms. Yes, I nodded. The same ones your client drafted for my home. I simply followed her fine example, word for word, he blinked. So you're saying, I'm saying, I interrupted softly, that I'm an old woman who learns fast, and that what's fair for one is fair for the other. Mr. Hanley looked both amused and cautious. I see. Well, technically you haven't violated any laws since no transaction occurred. I'll advise my client to, perhaps settle this privately. That would be wise, I said, smiling, because I do hate public scandals. Don't you? He chuckled nervously and left. That night, Samantha came home furious. You embarrassed me. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I looked up from the living room armchair. Funny, I said. That's exactly how I felt when I found out you were selling my home. She glared at me, trembling with rage. You're toxic. You've turned Eric against me. I stood slowly, meeting her eyes. No, Samantha. I just reminded him where he came from. Her lips tightened, and for a second, I saw something flicker. Not just anger, but fear. Because deep down, she knew she'd lost control. The next morning, she packed a bag and left for her mother's house, for a break. Eric didn't stop her. He just sat at the kitchen table staring at his coffee, lost. Mom, he said quietly, I don't think she'll come back. I reached over and held his hand. Sometimes, son, when you marry for comfort, you forget what love feels like. He squeezed my hand, his eyes wet. I'm sorry for everything, I smiled faintly. Then let's start over. Just you and me, the way it used to be. A week later, I took down Samantha's fake listing. But not before I made sure everyone in the neighborhood knew the truth. Not through gossip, but through kindness. I invited the neighbors for tea, shared the story of the listing mistake, and laughed about it like a joke. People saw through it, of course. They always do, but no one dared look down on me, again. And when Eric finally moved out a few months later, this time, into a small apartment he paid for, he hugged me tighter than he had in years. I'll visit every weekend, he said. I smiled. Just remember, son, a home isn't a place. It's the people who keep their promises inside it. As he drove away, I looked at the house. The same creaky floors. The same window where George used to wave before work. I whispered softly. We did it, George. Our house is safe. Then I picked up my teacup, sat on the porch, and smiled as the wind rustled through the roses. Peace had finally come home. The house had grown quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that sits heavy in the air. Not peaceful, but watchful. Eric had moved into his small apartment across town, true to his word, and came by every weekend to mow the lawn or share a cup of tea. He'd call me Mom, in that soft way he hadn't used since he was a boy. It was nice. Comforting, almost. But life has a way of testing peace the moment you start to trust it. It began one Thursday evening, when I opened the front door to find Samantha standing on the porch. Suitcase in hand, eyes red and swollen, she looked different. The usual pride and sharpness were gone, replaced by something uncertain. Fear, maybe, or regret. "Margaret," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "Can I come in?" For a moment I considered saying no. I could have told her to go back where she came from, but I didn't. George would have said, "Kindness is the last card you play, but only if you can still afford it." So, I opened the door. She stepped inside slowly, glancing around as if the walls themselves might scold her. I didn't know where else to go. "Eric knows you're here?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. She shook her head. "Not yet. We haven't spoken much since I left." I gestured to the kitchen. "You can sit. I'll make tea." As I poured the hot water, she sat at the table, wringing her hands. "I was stupid," she said softly. I thought if we sold your house, we could start over. A bigger place, a better life." I stirred my tea slowly. A better life built on someone else's foundation usually collapses first. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I know, I was wrong. I just wanted Eric to be happy. I thought money would fix things," I sighed. "Money doesn't fix broken people, dear. It just makes their cracks shine brighter." She looked up, her voice trembling. "Can I stay here? Just for a few days? I'll stay out of your way." I hesitated. Every sensible thought screamed no, but I saw the way she held herself. Small, fragile, human. So I nodded. "You can stay in the guest room," I said quietly. "But just for a while." Her relief was almost pitiful. "Thank you, Margaret. I promise I won't cause any trouble." I smiled faintly. "Promises are easy to make. Let's see how you do keeping them." The first few days were uneventful. Samantha mostly stayed in her room, barely came down except for meals. She looked tired, haunted. I almost began to pity her, until the phone call. It was a Tuesday morning when the house phone rang. I picked it up, and a polite voice said, "Good morning, Mrs. Ellis. This is Bright Oak Realty. We're following up about your request to list your property again?" My stomach turned. "I'm sorry, what?" "Yes, ma'am," the woman said cheerfully. "We received an online submission from this address last night, confirming your intention to relist your house for sale. We just need your verbal confirmation to finalize." I hung up before she could finish. For a few seconds, I just stood there. Then I looked toward the hallway, toward the guest room door. My pulse quickened, but I didn't march there immediately. I waited. I watched. That evening, Samantha came down for dinner, all smiles and soft tones. "The stew smells lovely," she said, pretending everything was fine. I set her plate down, then gently placed my phone beside it. Screen on, showing the email confirmation from Bright Oak Realty. Her smile froze. "Samantha," I said quietly, "you want to explain this?" She swallowed hard. I don't know what that is." "Oh, come now," I replied softly. "You've always had a talent for paperwork." "I didn't do it," she snapped, panic rising. "Maybe it was a mistake." "Mistakes don't use your email address," I said, my tone calm but icy. "And they don't come from my Wi-Fi." She pushed back her chair. "You're twisting things again." "You never wanted me here!" I stood, my voice low but sharp. "No, Samantha. You never wanted me here. You wanted my house. You wanted the story of the sweet, naive old woman who wouldn't notice what you were doing." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You think I'm evil, but I'm just desperate. We're drowning in debt. Eric doesn't even know how bad it is. I thought I could fix it before he found out." I softened just a little. "You had every chance to tell the truth." She wiped her tears angrily. "And what? Be called a failure? Watch him hate me?" "Maybe," I said quietly. but at least he'd have respected your honesty." For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, without a word, she turned and walked upstairs. I sat there in the kitchen, the ticking clock the only sound in the house. Later that night, I heard her on the phone through the thin guest room wall. Her voice was low, frantic. "No, I can't pay that right now. Just give me a few more weeks." "No, please, I'll get the money." "Don't call my husband." I closed my eyes. The pieces fit together now. Debts. Desperation. Greed turned survival. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt something worse. Pity. Because desperation makes people do cruel things. The next morning, I went into town. Not to report her, not to shame her, but to prepare. At the local bank, I met with an old friend, Mr. Brooks. We'd known each other for decades. I explained the situation briefly, and he smiled kindly. "Still got some fight in you, eh, Margaret?" I smiled back. "Just enough to keep my house standing." He helped me set up a trust, transferring the property title officially into a family trust under my control. That meant no one, not Eric, not Samantha, not anyone, could sell or mortgage the house without my consent. When I came home, Samantha was packing. She didn't look angry this time. "Just tired. I'm leaving," she said quietly. "I can't face Eric. He'll never forgive me." I set my purse down. "Maybe not today," I said, "but someday he might." She looked at me, surprised. "Why aren't you calling the police? Or throwing me out?" I met her eyes. Because punishment isn't always about hurting someone. Sometimes it's about letting them live with what they've done. Her chin trembled. "I don't deserve your kindness." "No," I said softly, "but maybe you can earn it back." She nodded slowly, picked up her suitcase, and paused at the door. "Thank you for not hating me." I gave a faint smile. "I don't hate you, Samantha. I pity you. Because you spent so long chasing houses, you forgot how to build a home." And with that, she left. Weeks passed. The seasons began to shift. Crisp mornings, golden leaves, a softer kind of quiet. Eric came by one afternoon, holding an envelope. "She sent this," he said. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, a handwritten letter. "Margaret, you were right. I lost myself in trying to be more than I was. I sold trust for comfort and love for money. But I want to thank you for teaching me what real strength looks like. I'm getting help. And when I'm better, I'll try to make things right." Samantha folded the letter slowly, my eyes stinging just a little. "She's trying," I whispered. Eric smiled weakly. I didn't think she could change. I looked out the window at the rose garden. "Everyone can change," I said softly, "if life humbles them enough." He nodded. "You're a better person than I deserve, Mom." I reached for his hand and smiled. "You're my son, Eric. That's not something you earn. That's something you keep, or lose, by how you treat the ones who love you." He hugged me, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine. That night, as I sat by the fireplace, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the greed, the heartbreak. But in the end, maybe it wasn't about revenge at all. Maybe it was about reclaiming respect, not through anger, but through grace. Because sometimes, the strongest revenge isn't showing how hard you can hit back. It's showing how beautifully you can rise above it. Soft emotional piano fades. Camera pans out, Margaret sipping tea by the fire, the house glowing warmly behind her. The winter wind carried a different sound that year. Less of loss, more of reflection. Every morning, I'd sit by the bay window with my cup of tea, watching frost creep across the garden stones. The roses slept beneath their thin blanket of snow, waiting for spring. Maybe I was waiting too. Eric had taken a new job at a nearby college. He called every night, sometimes twice, like a boy trying to make up for lost years. Samantha's letter sat folded in the kitchen drawer. I told myself I'd thrown it away, but I hadn't. You don't discard remorse so easily when you know how rare it is. It was early March when a small envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a short note and a check, modest but enough to catch my breath. For the repairs I promised but never paid for. I've started again, one step at a time, so I didn't cash it. I placed it beside the teapot where I could see it each morning, proof that change was possible. 3 weeks later, she came back. I was pruning dead stems in the garden when a car door slammed softly behind me. I turned and saw Samantha standing at the gate, bundled in a coat that looked 2 sizes too big, her hands trembling around a paper bag. "Hi," she whispered. "Hello?" I said. The shears paused midair. "You look cold," she nodded. "May I come in?" I studied her face. The pride that once shielded her now replaced by humility, fragile but honest. "Yes," I said finally. "Come warm yourself." Inside, she moved carefully, as though afraid to disturb the air. She noticed the check still by the teapot and smiled faintly. "You didn't cash it." "I didn't need to," I said. "But I appreciated it." She set the paper bag on the counter. "I brought apple pie, homemade. I learned to bake." I arched a brow. "Learning patience, are we?" A shy laugh escaped her. "Something like that." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where so many battles had been fought in silence. Now only the hum of the refrigerator filled the gaps. "I'm working at a small cafe," she said after a while. "Nothing fancy, but I'm earning my own money, paying off debts. I wanted you to know." I nodded. "I'm glad you're doing something that's yours." Her eyes glistened. "Eric visits sometimes. He's polite, but it's hard. I don't blame him." "He'll come around," I said quietly. "Time doesn't heal everything, but it gives us room to breathe." She hesitated, then pulled a small envelope from her purse. "I came to give you this." Inside was a property transfer form, the deed to her own house, signed over to my name. "What is this?" I asked sharply. "Payment," she whispered. "Not revenge. Just fairness. You sold my house to protect yourself, and you were right. I want you to have it back now, legally. I don't want anything that isn't mine anymore." I stared at her. "You don't owe me this, Samantha." "I owe myself," she said. "I can't move forward while debt, moral or financial, hangs over me." I slid the paper back across the table. "Keep it, use it to rebuild. But promise me one thing. Never value walls more than the people inside them." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I promise." For the first time, her touch didn't feel like intrusion. It felt like family. Weeks rolled into months. Samantha began visiting every Sunday. Sometimes she'd bring muffins, sometimes just stories from her cafe. Eric joined once in a while, sitting between us awkwardly at first, until laughter started to replace guilt. One afternoon, while we were sipping lemonade on the porch, Eric cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the old orchard behind the property. It's just sitting there. What if we turned it into something good? A community garden. For families who don't have yards?" Samantha's eyes lit up. "We could teach kids to grow vegetables. Maybe even start a charity stall." I smiled. "That orchard hasn't seen joy in decades. Maybe it's time." And so it began. Every Saturday, neighbors came with shovels and smiles. Children painted fences. Eric installed benches. Samantha organized bake sales to buy seeds. The once silent backyard filled with voices, laughter, and the rustle of new life pushing through the soil. One morning, as I watched Samantha teaching a little girl how to plant tomatoes, I realized she was glowing, not from pride, but from purpose. Perhaps that was all she ever needed. Summer arrived, warm and generous. The garden thrived, the orchard alive again. We named it Hope's Corner, because everything planted there came from regret turned into renewal. Reporters came once, curious about the story of the old widow who turned her betrayal into a community dream. I laughed when I saw the headline. Life had a strange sense of humor. That evening, we sat together under the apple tree, Eric, Samantha, and I. The sky was painted in soft pinks and golds, and the air smelled like promise. Samantha handed me a small wooden box. "I made this," she said. Inside was a carved plaque. "Home isn't what we build. It's what we forgive." I ran my fingers over the letters, heart heavy and light all at once. "It's beautiful," I said. Eric put an arm around her shoulders. "She's changed, Mom. really changed. I can see that, I whispered. As twilight settled, I looked at them, the couple who once broke my trust, now mending their own hearts in the soil we'd tended together. Forgiveness, I realized, wasn't a single act. It was a garden, needing care every day. Maybe one day they'd move back in, maybe not, but I'd learned something powerful. Holding on to anger doesn't protect a house. It just keeps the door locked when love tries to return. Later, when everyone had gone, I sat alone on the porch. The wind soft against my face. Fireflies blinked in the orchard like quiet blessings. I whispered to the night, "You were right, George. Kindness really is the last card you play, and this time, I didn't just survive, I lived." By the end of that summer, Hope's Corner wasn't just a garden anymore. It was a story people told. Kids who had never touched soil now came running every Saturday with tiny gloves and bigger smiles. Retired neighbors found reasons to leave their porches again. Even the local newspaper wrote about us. One woman's betrayal turned into a town's blessing. Every time I read that headline, I smiled. They called me one woman, but I wasn't alone anymore. One crisp September morning, I woke earlier than usual. The sky was pale blue, streaked with silver. Dew sparkled on every leaf like the world had been dusted with forgiveness overnight. Eric was already in the orchard, hammering a wooden post into the ground. Samantha knelt beside him, tying a small sign to it. When I got closer, I saw the words painted carefully in green. George's bench, for all who need a place to rest. My breath caught. "You made this?" I asked softly. Samantha nodded. "You talk about him all the time." "I thought he deserved a corner here." Eric wiped his hands. "We built the bench from old barnwood. Strong stuff, like you two." For a moment I couldn't speak. I traced the carved letters with trembling fingers. The wood was rough, honest, alive. "Thank you," I finally whispered. "He would have loved this." Samantha smiled. "Then we did something right." Later that day, volunteers gathered for the end-of-season celebration. We laid out pies and cider under the apple trees, music drifting from someone's old radio. Children chased one another between the rows of sunflowers. Laughter tangled with the rustle of leaves. I sat on George's bench, watching everything unfold. The air smelled of cinnamon and wet earth. Samantha came over carrying 2 mugs. "Hot cider," she said, handing me one. "Sweet enough to make you forget your age for a minute." I chuckled. At my age, forgetting things is a daily sport. She laughed too, a sound free of guilt this time. "You know, when I first met Eric, I thought love was about never being afraid. But real love," she looked toward him, stacking crates with the children. "Real love is about being brave enough to face what you broke." I nodded. "And wise enough to fix it with your own hands." She leaned back, sighing. "I still wake up some nights thinking about what I did. About the sale. The lies. Good," I said softly. "It means your conscience still works." Her eyes widened. Then she smiled through a tear. "You really are impossible to offend." "I've simply run out of room for resentment," I replied. "It takes up too much space where peace should live." As the afternoon sun dipped lower, a young reporter approached with a notepad. "Mrs. Ellis, could we interview you for a feature on the garden's impact?" I nearly said no, but Samantha nudged me. "Tell your story, Margaret. People need to hear it." So I did. I told them about greed, about betrayal, about the moment I almost lost everything and the grace that built it back. When I finished, the reporter looked stunned. "That's beautiful. You turned pain into purpose." "Pain's just a teacher," I said, "but you decide if you want to learn." He smiled, scribbling quickly. "One last question. What do you hope this garden means to people?" I looked out over the rows of tomatoes and wildflowers and the children laughing in between. "I hope," I said slowly, "they remember that what's buried isn't always gone. Sometimes it's just waiting for light." Autumn lingered long that year. The trees burned gold and red, the garden humming with bees desperate for the last taste of nectar. But time, like soil, keeps moving. One evening, Eric and Samantha came over for dinner with a question that changed everything. "Mom," Eric began, "there's a small farmhouse for sale near the lake. We were thinking, maybe we could move closer to you. Help keep Hope's Corner running full-time." I stared at them, surprised. "That's a big step." Samantha smiled nervously. "It's not about guilt. It's about belonging. We finally understand what you built here." I felt tears press against my eyes. "I'd like that," I whispered. "I'd like that very much." Winter crept back with its quiet grace. Snow blanketed the orchard again, hiding the colors but not the life underneath. Each flake that fell felt like a promise. Rest now. Grow later. One night, as wind moaned against the windows, I found Samantha in the kitchen making soup. "Can I help?" I asked. She laughed. "You? Sit down before you burn something." I sat, smiling. "Bossy thing." She stirred the pot gently. "Margaret, I want to thank you, not just for forgiving me, but for showing me what forgiveness looks like. It isn't weak. It's brave." I met her gaze. "You earned it, dear. You planted every seed of it yourself." She reached across the counter and squeezed my hand. "I think of you as my mother now." Something in me cracked open, softly, sweetly. "And I think of you as the daughter I never had." For the first time, those words didn't taste like loss. They tasted like peace. Months passed. Hope's Corner opened again in spring, brighter than ever. The local paper featured us twice. A charity group offered to fund more gardens in neighboring towns. Eric managed the logistics. Samantha oversaw volunteers, and I told stories. Children loved to gather around my chair while I talked about the first apple tree George and I planted, or the night Samantha showed up at my door. I never made her the villain. I made her the turning point. Because the truth is, most people aren't villains. They're just lost for a while. One late afternoon, as the sun melted into the horizon, Samantha came running toward me, excitement in her eyes. "Margaret!" "Guess what? We're being invited to speak at a community conference about rebuilding trust." I blinked. "Us?" She nodded, breathless. "They want to hear your story." "Our story," I laughed softly. "Well then, they'd better have plenty of tea." She hugged me, her warmth fierce. "You've changed my life." "No, dear," I whispered. "You changed your own. I just gave you a place to start." That night, after everyone had gone home, I wandered through the orchard alone. The stars hung low, and the scent of soil wrapped around me like memory. I sat on George's bench and whispered to the dark. "You see, love, they finally learned to plant instead of take." Somewhere, I could almost feel his chuckle in the wind. "That's my girl, inside." The clock ticked softly on the mantel. Tomorrow would bring more work, more laughter, maybe new mistakes, but that's life. You can't control every season, only how gently you tend what's growing. I looked at the framed plaque Samantha had carved. Home isn't what we build. It's what we forgive. For the first time, I truly understood it. I closed my eyes, feeling the warmth of the house around me, the heartbeat of forgiveness under its roof. And just before sleep carried me away, I whispered a final prayer of gratitude, not for the things I'd gained, but for the people I'd found again. Soft piano fades. Final scene, the orchard glowing under lanterns, the bench bathed in moonlight. Fade out. The spring air smelled like new beginnings, the kind that sneak up quietly, like forgiveness had been growing underground all winter, waiting for the courage to bloom. Hope's Corner was alive again, busier than ever. The hum of laughter, the rustle of leaves, the gentle thump of shovels in soil. It sounded like life starting over. From my porch, I could see Samantha helping a group of children plant tomato seedlings. She wore George's old sun hat, too big for her, always slipping sideways. Eric was fixing the fence nearby, humming the same tune his father used to whistle. I smiled. They had built something I never dared to dream of. A place where every mistake could turn into mercy if watered enough. But that spring, I also knew something else. I was getting tired. The doctor had told me in his quiet, cautious voice that my heart was slowing down. Nothing tragic, he'd said. Just nature doing what it does. I nodded, thanked him, and went home to bake a pie. Death didn't scare me. Unfinished love did. So I decided I'd leave them something more than land, something to last through every season they'd face without me. The letter I started it that evening, sitting by the window where George's chair still leaned against the wall. My hands trembled as I wrote, but my mind was calm. My dearest Eric and Samantha, if you are reading this, it means my voice has grown quiet, but I'm still here, in every tree that blooms, in every laugh that drifts across Hope's Corner. I spent too many years protecting things, money, property, pride. But when I lost everything, I found the only thing worth guarding: kindness. Samantha, when you betrayed me, I thought I'd never heal. But you showed me something greater than betrayal. You showed me change. You taught me that a broken person can become a builder. Eric, you were my anchor, my reason to stay strong. But remember, strength isn't stubbornness. It's knowing when to let go, when to love softer. Together, you've made this place something holy. Keep it that way. Keep the doors open. Feed whoever is hungry. Listen to whoever is lonely. And when you plant something new, whisper a prayer for the one who planted before you. I don't want a graveyard. I want this orchard to be my memory. Scatter my ashes beneath the first apple tree George and I planted. That's where I learned what love could grow into. When I finished, I folded the letter neatly and tucked it inside an envelope marked for after. Then I took a deep breath and smiled. It felt right. The final spring. Days grew softer after that. I spent my mornings sitting on George's bench, watching people arrive, some laughing, some crying, all leaving lighter than when they came. Sometimes, Samantha joined me with her sketchbook. Drawing helps me think, she'd say, shading the lines of the orchard. What are you drawing today? I asked one morning. She turned the sketchbook toward me. It was the bench, me sitting on it, sunlight streaming through the trees. At the bottom, she'd written, "The woman who turned pain into a garden." I blinked hard to keep my tears from falling. "You're getting too good at flattery," she laughed softly. "No, Margaret, just finally seeing clearly." One afternoon, the wind was warm, carrying the scent of apple blossoms. I felt dizzy, just for a moment, so I sat down on the bench. The sky shimmered between the branches. I could almost see George there, smiling from the other side of the sunlight. "Looks like you did it," I whispered. "You'd be proud of them." For a long time, I just listened, to the laughter, to the birds, to the life I'd helped rebuild. And when I finally closed my eyes, it wasn't out of sadness. It was peace. 1 year later, the next spring, Hope's Corner bloomed brighter than ever. Samantha walked through the orchard holding a bouquet of white tulips. Eric followed behind her, carrying their newborn daughter wrapped in a yellow blanket. They stopped beneath the first apple tree, where a small plaque now rested in the soil. "Margaret Ellis, she planted love." Samantha knelt down, tears glistening. "She'd have loved you, Lily," she whispered to the baby. "She taught me how." Eric placed the letter, now weathered from rereading, back into its glass frame near the tree. "She's still here," he said softly. "Every spring proves it." They stood there for a while, letting the wind weave through their hair, carrying the scent of blossoms and memory. Then Samantha turned toward the new group of volunteers waiting nearby. "Let's begin," she said with a steady voice. "This season we plant for Margaret. Legacy by the 2nd year, Hope's Corner had spread to 3 towns. By the 5th, it became a foundation teaching people how to rebuild trust through community gardens. And in every one of them, a wooden bench stood under an apple tree, carved with the same words. Home isn't what we build. It's what we forgive." Samantha told the story of Margaret to everyone who asked how it began. Sometimes her voice trembled, sometimes she smiled through tears, but she always ended the same way. She didn't just save a house, she saved us. The final scene years later, as the sun dipped behind the orchard, Lily, a bright-eyed teenager now, sat on her grandmother's bench. She read aloud from a faded journal Samantha had kept. "Hope's Corner isn't about plants. It's about second chances." Lily looked up at the golden trees. "Grandma," she whispered to the wind, "I think I understand now." The branches rustled softly. as if answering her, and for a heartbeat, the air seemed to shimmer with the warmth of a woman who had once lost everything, and chose to forgive instead.